Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of 10 Minutes with TmFal. This is TmFal, and today we're going to be talking about boundaries, what they are, why we need them, what they're not, and really how boundaries are really helpful, healthy boundaries, that is. So boundaries, it's really kind of, if you think about it in the simplest form, it's just kind of a line that kind of encircles an area and kind of lets people know this is what you will accept or not. It kind of helps define who we are, who we're not, and what we will accept or not. And so boundaries are healthy, and they really are important to help us kind of define who we are. And in its purest sense, they're really for us and not really about others. It's really for us to define who we are, what we will accept, what we want. And so sometimes if it gets very unclear about why you're having boundaries, it's important to say it's not for others. It's for you because they're healthy. And so obviously with that, we need to talk about creating healthy boundaries, right? So we're not talking about walls, emotional walls or fences or fortresses or forts that we build up to protect ourselves from other people. Think of it more like a line, like a hedge, nice hedge around a property that people can see in the property. It kind of tells a line about where, that property ends and what is public. People can see it, they can admire it, you can talk to them. It's not a wall or a big fence or fortress where people can't see in. So it's really important to define that you want healthy boundaries. And it's important because boundaries are these lines that separate kind of what we want from what we don't want, what we accept, what we don't. And it allows us to let people know what we will accept in our lives or not. And they are, the important thing about boundaries, if they're done right, is that they're healthy. So they're healthy because they're well thought out. They are not reactive, they're proactive. So this is you defining, yourself and then defining what you want or do not want. So they are proactive, not reactive. Again, they're stated in mind with you first, kind of protecting the things that you want and talking about things you don't want. And boundaries are important because, you need to create boundaries around your time, around your energy, relationships, money, things you will accept. It's really important. And some boundaries are more flexible, some are dynamic, some are hard and fast, where this is the line I call on this thing. But they're really important. And sometimes we think about physical boundaries, about your space. Like people know, okay, you can't come too close to me, or you can't just show up in my house unannounced, or you can't just be in my physical space. But I think those are easier to enforce, and they're usually pretty obvious to people around you, how comfortable you are, especially around physical boundaries. But things around your energy, boundaries on your energy, your time are really important. And, especially sometimes even with people you care about, your children, your family, setting some boundaries around your time just so you can have some time for yourself to meditate, to rest, to be yourself. And when they're explained as this is what I need to be my optimal self, most people understand. And I remember when my kids were little, and even, when it was time for me to rest, and it was that line that I came upstairs. And if I did come upstairs for that hour and a half, unless it was an emergency, mom needed that space. And they understood that. So I think boundaries are important if they're healthy, they are proactive, and they're stated in a way that they're to optimize you. And so not really against other people, they're for you. And that helps. And they're important for work, for your coworkers. They're important in friendships to define boundaries. They're important in relationships, romantic relationships, other relationships with family. I'm a physician, even with patients, as you can care and do your best, but still have some boundaries around time and space. and access are really important so you can optimize things. Again, not walls or impenetrable fences or forts, but just boundaries. And for some people, it's easy to talk about these boundaries. They're more intuitive. They kind of know what's going on. You state it once, they get it. For some people, they don't get it, and you have to state it over and over again. And don't assume that everyone knows about boundaries or is okay with boundaries. So if people don't have boundaries in their lives and around their space and energy and relationships, they may not know where you're coming from. So don't assume. And know that sometimes boundaries are flexible. And there are times when things change because if it's a different season in life, a new work position, a new change in your family situation, a new kid, something goes on where you need more boundaries on your time and energy and space. Doesn't always mean it's permanent. It may be flexible. And most people will respect boundaries when they're well stated, when they're healthy, when they're not reactive, and they're stated not as against others, but for you. And most people will see that and respect that. They may not understand it initially, but once they see why that's important to you, most people will respect it. And there are going to be others. So, if you've never had boundaries, you've been resentful about, how much people are in your space and your time and your energy, but you never had boundaries. And then you decide, you're going to start having some boundaries, healthy boundaries to protect you and to optimize you. It might be very difficult for people in your lives, your family, your friends, your coworkers, others, if it's new. Just like with change is hard. Nobody really likes change. So you might hear things like, well, wow, you've changed. Well, yes, you have changed because now you've gone from no boundaries to having boundaries. You might hear things like, wow, you think you're all that. Well, yes, you are all that. You are all that because, you're sitting down, you're evaluating your space, your time, your energy, your relationships, and you're creating healthy boundaries so that you're not resentful of people cutting into your time all the time. So, yes, you are all that, and that's okay. So if somebody thinks you're all that is why you're having boundaries, well, the answer is yes. Yes, you are all that. Some people may say, wow, you don't care anymore. You're limiting our access to you all the time and that the answer to that is not that you don't care. The answer to that is you want to be your best self. And the way you can be your best self is to have some time where you're not interrupted and your energy is not drained and your time is not cut into. And so, those interruptions that come constantly at work or people calling you all the time to dump on you, to just tell you stuff, well, that's time you need to optimize your outcomes, to reflect, to introspect. And so the answer is you don't care. The answer is not you don't care. The answer is you need time and space and energy for yourself so you can be a better person. So, there are things that will happen when you start to create boundaries. But as long as you realize that these are healthy boundaries, they're proactive, well thought out, they're stated with you in mind, not against others, but for you. And they're important to preserve your time, your energy, your resources, your relationships, your money. It's really important. And most people will respect that when those boundaries happen. So it's important. Boundaries are important. They're healthy. They're necessary for us to be able to optimize our outcomes. You might be met with resistance, which hopefully over time will fade away. Most people will respect those boundaries because they see why that's important to you. Eventually, those who don't will. And if they don't, well, the boundaries are, again, for you, not against them. And when you are a person who has boundaries, one thing you do is you respect boundaries in other people. You see it and you respect it, and you're more likely to be respectful of other people. So boundaries are important. Think about what areas of your life you can create healthy boundaries in. and go for it, knowing that most people will respect that. Other people will eventually get it. And if it's done as a healthy way that is proactive with you in mind, not against others, and not huge emotional walls or fences or 4 days to wall off other people, boundaries are a win-win, and that's something that we should work on in our lives. They help us define who we are to others, what we want, what we don't want, what we will accept and will not accept. And the first step to creating boundaries is to know who you are, because that then tells you what you want and what you don't want. So thank you for listening to 10 Minutes with TmFal. I hope you enjoyed this episode on boundaries. Good night.